Hello, and I'd like to welcome you to the first Killeen event of the 2018-2019 academic year. This year, as you know, we'll be inviting you to consider questions surrounding our theme, community and technology, and the philosophical and theological implications of our pervasive connectivity. Also, I want to remind you to please silence your devices if you haven't yet. If you don't know me, my name is Dr. Carol Bruess, and I'm a professor of theology and religious studies here at St. Norbert College. I also serve as chair of the Killeen Chair Committee. Before we begin tonight's event, I just wanted to remind you and let you know about upcoming events we're sponsoring this year under the theme of community and technology. Later in the semester, on October 18th, we will be welcoming Dr. Shannon Valor, who is the William Rewak Professor in the Department of Philosophy at Santa Clara University. She will be speaking to us on virtuous and virtual communities, civic flourishing in the digital age. And this event will be at 7 o'clock, but in the Fort Howard Theater, as will the rest of our events this year. In the spring semester, we're looking forward to welcoming Nicholas Carr, who is the New York Times bestselling author of The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. He will be speaking to us on the myth of the global village, how technology divides us. And this will take place on Thursday, February 21st in the Fort Howard. On Tuesday, April 16th, we will be welcoming Sister Ilia Delio, the Josephine Connolly Endowed Chair in Theology at Villanova University. She will be talking to us about artificial intelligence and human desire, asking, can a robot truly love? And this will be at 7 o'clock that evening as well. We sincerely hope that you, your colleagues, your friends, and your students will be able to join us for any and all of these upcoming events. But this evening, we are honored and very pleased to be joined by Dr. Carol Bruess, who is Professor Emerita of Communication at the University of St. Thomas. She's an accomplished teacher, and she's a scholar on issues of happiness, relationships, family life, and the role of technology in these areas of our lives. She will be speaking to us on our love affair with technology, some inconvenient truths. Following her talk, we'll have a brief period of question and answer. We'll have microphones, and we'll be able to hopefully get to at least some of your questions. If after the question and answer period you wish to continue the conversation, we would invite you outside this hall for some light refreshments. We also have Carol's books for sale outside for 10% off. So anyway, thank you again for being here. We're glad to have such a great turnout tonight. And I would now like to invite my colleague in communication here at St. Norbert, Dr. Anna Herman, to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Good evening. Dr. Carol Bruess is Professor Emerita of Communication and Journalism and formerly Director of Family Studies at the University of St. Thomas. Carol earned her BA in Art and gained a husband from St. Norbert College, and her MA and Ph.D. from Ohio University's School of Interpersonal Communication. You may be wondering what the connection is between Carol's degree in art and interpersonal communication is. Carol will passionately describe that both fields allow one to tell a story through message creation. Carol has been effectively teaching and researching these messages for the last 26 years. Among Carol's researching and teaching expertise are couple and family communication, families and couples in the digital age, healthy relationships, and mediated family communication, just to name a few. Over the years, Carol has either authored or edited 5 academic books, one being titled Family Communication in the Age of Digital and Social Media. Carol has also authored 3 contemporary self-help books based on her research of couples, families, and friends. Carol has published numerous research articles in peer-reviewed journals and has given dozens of academic presentations at regional, national, and international conferences. I wish I could give you a more specific number, but there are way too many presentations to count. Seriously, on her Vita, there's like 7 pages of presentations. It's really impressive. Since Carol's return, return to St. Norbert College, she has remained an active teacher, researcher, and writer, and continues to inspire others through these practices. Most recently, Carol has been named resident scholar at the Cassandra Voss Center. Please welcome the talented Dr. Carol Bruess.
I always wanted to come from out back, be like a star. Thank you, Dr. Herman. It's too kind. And because you also are from Milton, Wisconsin, my hometown, you are empirically cool. So let's start with this truth. Besides my work in teaching about relationships, I also have taught public speaking about 287 times in the last 27 years. And it may or may not be true that every great lecture in the history of all highly effective rhetorical events has begun with the photo of an adorable dog. But we don't have any research evidence about how many of the best public lectures until tonight begin with a talking dog. So I now introduce to you our dog Fred, who just last week made his debut on the Facebook.
Hey everybody out there, Facebook land. My name's Fred. Oh yeah, I was hacking to my mom's Facebook account while she's taking a nap. She likes taking naps. Usually I take them with her, but I snuck up to the car and logged into her Facebook. So I'm thinking, now that I'm a Wisconsin dog, cheese-loving dog, feeling a little lonely over here. Cause that mom of mine, she's a little, controlling, little crazy, won't even let me out of the house by myself. So I'm thinking about a little online dating, a little doggy online romance. I've never done this before, so I could use some help. Like, how do I create my profile? Do I just let it all hang out there? Do I just upload a photo that includes that snaggletooth mine that you see up there on my right lip? Or do I Photoshop it? Do I include all the things that might not be so attractive about myself to other people, or dogs that is? Like the fact that my breath, it might not be so sugary. And these Tootsie Rolls, speaking of sugar, these Tootsie Rolls I like to leave around the house. Sometimes I just can't help it. Do I just put it out there and be honest? Or should I maybe make some doggy stuff up? So do you have any advice for me? Fred here, Cheeseland, cheese-loving dog. Ashley, don't tell anybody, but I'm vegan. A lot of people in Wisconsin are vegan, so I don't really tell people that. Not gonna put it in my profile. Anyway, if you can help me out, and I'm creating my first online dating profile. Alright, let me know what you think.
Fred wanted to come tonight, but he's grounded. So, what does Fred and Facebook, and why did we just spend 2 minutes watching adorable Fred, have to do with our love affair with technology? Well, everything, especially in my family, who, much to their dismay, will admit and tell you very clearly that I do love me some Facebook. And I might currently be obsessed with the best $4.99 I've ever spent on my new favorite app, My Talking Pet. And according to the neuroscience on this topic of my pure enjoyment and the hundreds of comments and lots of positive feedback, the reaction on Facebook after Fred hacked into my Facebook account. Here is what was happening in my brain. That little zing you get when someone likes your pictures or posts or comments about how funny you are on Facebook, and in fact, this doesn't even have to be the funny comments or the kind comments. That reward center in your brain, that nucleus accumbens, that is giving you a big old boost. A research team in Germany, Nesci et al., published just one of the many dozens of articles recently out there with similar evidence that our brains and our bodies are very much rewarded by our social media use. And that for some people, this feedback loop of reward is similar to other types of addiction. This German research team, in fact, could predict the intensity of people's Facebook use by looking at their brains' responses to positive social feedback inside an MRI scanner. And I want to begin tonight with this, I don't know if it's a confession or maybe it's a disclaimer. I am not a tech naysayer. I am not a tech hater. And my primary argument over the next 35 minutes or so will be that there are some inconvenient and painful truths about how tech is not positively influencing our lives, our relationships, our brains, our attention spans, and our communities. And I will primarily argue that I think what we are wise to do is to reevaluate the relationship we have with technology. Because we now have enough research across multiple disciplines to ring some alarm bells about what I and others call our collective love affair with technology, one that might not always be serving us well. And I want to begin tonight with a full and passionate acknowledgement that in and of itself, of course, tech is not a bad thing. And in fact, our technology can be and is a beautiful thing in so many ways, in so many aspects, in so many communities. I was thrilled to learn that the entire Killeen lecture series this year is setting out to explore this complex, often paradoxical set of questions about technology and community. So I want to begin tonight by fronting what is indeed true. That yes, technology can be life-changing, it can be life-giving, it can be relationship-enhancing. I don't deny that, and I don't want to minimize ever the way that tech can, according to people who participated in a recent Pew report, and I'm quoting them directly, tech can allow us, of course, to get answers to questions about almost anything by just asking our phone. Tech helps us save money on everything, including clothing and shoes, airfares, hotels, and eating at better restaurants. It allows us to have better knowledge, to empower individuals to have better support toward their own health and when they face challenges. It allows us to share photos, of course, of new generations instantly with loved ones on the other side of the world, to joke, to tease, to mourn. It allows us to maintain marriages across miles and time zones. And of course, tech gives a profound and powerful platform, a voice to those traditionally silenced and marginalized. It provides, provides high impact, low cost ways to organize around causes in ways that our ancestors could imagine only as science fiction. Tech is being used to save lives and make lives better. And I'd like to point to two examples. The first one, I think one of the most powerful among so many. This long overdue movement would not be as big and as impactful without technology. Some argue it wouldn't exist without technology. And in fact, there are so many other creative, smart technologies out there that are currently being deployed to reduce the likelihood of sexual assault through new research-supported apps for sexual assault narrative sharing, as seen in the nonprofit Callisto, whose mission is to create technology to combat sexual assault, empower survivors, and advance justice. Callisto's app-based survivor-centered approach increases the chances that a survivor will report and that they will experience positive emotional and adjudicative outcomes. It also enables colleges and universities to detect repeat predators. So I want to begin by saying I absolutely do not deny these and countless other ways tech is life-changing. For instance, one of the very convincing arguments about the life-giving nature of tech in our lives is that of my friend Dr. Deanna Thompson at Hamline University in St. Paul. Deanna and I actually met when we were first-year faculty members at Hamline 24 years ago now. We we were both brand new professors and brand new mothers. Those first babies of ours are now college graduates. Dr. Deanna Thompson was a woman who, before her life situation with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer, was also anti-technology and a self-admitted skeptic of anything and everything virtual. One of Deanna's most recent books that has captured broad attention is called The Virtual Body of Christ in a Suffering World. You can actually listen to a really brilliant lecture she gives on this topic if you just Google 2017 Luther Seminary Reformation Festival. In it, what she is doing is discussing in an incredibly compelling way how virtual presence of the hands and feet of Christ can indeed be life-sustaining as a venue for ministering to others. As she says in this talk and in her book, no, I am not asking if Jesus would have used social media. What she is doing now is profoundly helping churches and pastors and faith communities all over the world consider ways that tech can enhance their ministries and relieve suffering. So yes, I agree. Tech can be life-giving, life-changing, and build communities. I believe that. And what I also believe is that we all should be a little concerned, because the research is starting to pile up, and there are some inconvenient truths becoming painfully but importantly apparent. And much of the research is pointing to how the ways that we use and love and rely on and mindlessly embrace our technology, even in our most sacred spaces, like during Sunday Mass. I saw it again last Sunday, the Sunday before that. The way we use technology in our bedrooms and at funerals. Yes, a large percentage of adults admit to texting at funerals. And we're going to come back to that topic in a minute. All of that digital technology, according to the research, is not, it appears, actually helping us achieve what most of us are reporting we want and that we strive for. Healthy minds, great relationships, solid sleep, alert brains, strong families, focused attention spans, in-depth conversations, strong and kind communities, solid mental health, sustainable well-being. Perhaps you are already aware or feeling what MIT researcher and author Dr. Sherry Turkle has said so well. Technology now has a powerful seductive undertone in all of our lives. She also argues that technology saturation in our lives is a little bit like climate change. So day to day, most of us feel safe in life and work, and we usually aren't thinking about 20, 30 years from now. Day to day, we aren't necessarily or fully noticing the subtle but profound shifts in our world. And thus, there's this temptation to think, according to Turkle and others, that we can just go on the way we are and everything will be okay. As Turkle points out, of all the changes in our social world right now, here is one truth that we cannot overlook, that we rarely give each other our full attention anymore. And we've forgotten how unusual this has become. We've forgotten that most young people are growing up without ever having unbroken conversations, that most of us never have experienced single tasking or unitasking, ever. We consistently, constantly multitask. So as Dr. Herman mentioned, most of what I study is micro-human interaction with a focus on families and couple relationships. So let's start by talking a little bit about what the research is saying that tech is doing in those contexts in particular. So a few years ago, I published this 535-page edited volume on how tech is affecting our families and our couples and our parenting relationships. And don't buy it unless you're a grad student or a researcher, because you'll be bored to tears. It's only meant for other researchers. But as I went about preparing and editing this book with 22 research teams from across the country, I started to keep a list of the many things that made me go, oh, or yikes, or intriguing. Some of the trends in the research that we should be paying attention to. What some of the best data are starting to tell us. And that's why I have come to believe and start to argue, and I'll tell anyone who's willing to listen, that I think what we're wise to do right now is not ditch our tech, not bash our tech, but to reevaluate the relationship we have with our technology, and especially our love affair with smartphones. So let's dig into that, and about which the research is most clear. Almost all of us are living in the always-on environment, a state of perpetual contact. Over 96% of the world's population, and Norbert included, now uses mobile phone technology. We are reachable anywhere, and we don't just love our phones, we love smartphones in a way that is unprecedented. According to Pew, almost 77% of people in the US own smartphones right now. And the research is pretty clear that our flip phones, they were just not so seductive. They were not so attractive. And most of us don't just own smartphones. Our smartphones are on all the time. In fact, 82% of smartphone users say they never or rarely turn their phones off. Full disclosure, about a year ago, I didn't even know you could turn your phone off. A 21-year-old had to show me how. I was like, seriously, Mom? Studies show that many adults in the US admit that they, quote, can't live without technology. Can't live. 53% of millennials say they would rather lose their sense of smell than their technology. 1/3 of adult Americans said that if they had to choose between sexual intimacy with their partner or spouse or having their smartphone for a year, they'd choose their phone. What else are Americans telling researchers they'd be willing to give up for a year instead of lose their phones? 55% said they'd give up eating out. 45% said they'd give up vacation. More than 30% said friends. They would be willing to stop seeing their friends in person for a year. 46% said they would work an extra day each week to keep their phone. 70% said alcohol, 55% said caffeine, 63% chocolate, and 22% said their toothbrush. Honey, you're keeping your toothbrush. What are some of the other things that people say they would give up? They said they'd give up their car, their TV, their pet, they'd give up shampooing for a week, and they'd give up cheese. Okay, raise your hand. Would you give up cheese for a year? No, there's like, it's a biased sample. We're in Wisconsin, people. We're cheese-loving people. Okay, given all of that, these statistics should not be too surprising either. The average American adult checks their phone every 6.5 minutes. Approximately 2/3 of us check our phone within 5 minutes of waking up. Most teens and young adults send an average of 100 texts a day. Adults attend to their digital devices around 150 times a day. 50% of smartphone owners sleep with their phones. 70% check their phone even when it has made no noise or buzz to indicate that a message or voicemail or notification has arrived. 23% of people admit that when in public spaces, they are at least occasionally using their phone to avoid interacting with others who are near them. 27, is that you? That got a lot of reaction. A little guilt chit-chat there. 27% of smartphone users say that they use the apps on their phone continuously. All of this adds up. We in the US are collectively checking our phones 8 billion times a day. 8 billion. And if that doesn't disturb you, this should. At any single moment, the research is suggesting that approximately 10% of all drivers in the US are actively texting, posting to Facebook, or using social media while driving. And interestingly, or maybe not so interestingly, when Pew Research Center asked US Americans for their bottom line judgment about the role of digital technology in their own lives, the vast majority of us feel it's a good thing. And I would have to agree. Overall, it's a good thing. Yes. And So I try not to ever use the word but. I try to substitute but with and. Our phones, our smartphones, are uniquely attractive to us. Different than any other technology. Computers, iPads, different than even all of the other screens that we love right now in 2018. And I have found this research most particularly and inconveniently intriguing. Inconvenient because I don't want to give it up either. I don't want to change my habits. According to Pew Research on our love affair with phones, and the more I look at this photo, it feels like Norbert was crushed by a phone. The idea was that he was hugging the phone. 39% of adults have what's called a symbiotic relationship with their smartphone. Symbiotic, meaning a relationship of mutual dependence. We are using words to talk about our phones with the same language we talk about a lover. Research shows that we are actually creating an emotional bond with our smartphones. Many of us report in multiple ways that we see our phones as extensions of self, as an appendage to our bodies. And this research starts to make more sense when you look at the research revealing that smartphones give individuals this feeling of euphoria, this feeling of being valued and loved. Remember that little thing in the brain? And it makes even more sense when you start to look at this research. The neurochemical high that we get from the little buzzes and notifications and the little likes on our Instas is similar to taking a hit of cocaine. According to University of Chicago's Booth School of Business, Twitter is more addicting than cigarettes. The feeling you get from checking Twitter creates the same temporary high or buzz as a cigarette break. And substitute Instagram, Snapchat, whatever it is you love the most, that kind of social media. Again, zing, and we get addicted to that feeling. We like feeling good. This research, though, probably is not going to leave you feeling so good. Your smartphone harbors more germs than a public restroom doorknob. It's true. You like my little smiling pile of poo emoji there? I speak fluent emoji. One of the things we also know is that with new realities come new words. So a guy named Dr. Brandon McDaniel, he's a professor of family social science at Illinois State University. He was studying and is studying technology as it interferes in family parenting and couple relationships, and he coined this new phrase, Technoparents. And he did so because in his and others' research, we're finding that 38% of individuals report texting or sending emails during conversations with their partners. 62% of couples report that technology interferes with their couple leisure time at least once a day. 25% of U.S. American adults report feeling like they have to answer their cell phone. Have to, even when it interrupts the family meal. And then when we look into this research further, the bottom line of these realities is that the frequency of such interruptions is related to lower life satisfaction, lower relationship satisfaction, and greater depression. This reality of this always-on environment reflects such a profound change in the landscape of families that technology is now being considered by marriage and family therapists in a completely new way. 2 chapters in that edited volume that I published addresses the way that therapists are shifting from seeing technology not merely as tools or patterns of communication, but as members of the family itself. So marriage and family therapists have long used this tool called the family genogram, widely adopted, used for decades to assess family interaction patterns. And now therapists are starting to use the family technogram and do research about its effectiveness, situating the device as a family member. And one of the reasons this is so significant and necessary is when you think about it, not until the past 2 decades have at least 3 generations in a family had the opportunity to engage in consistent digital technology use. And let's talk about family relationships in particular. So most of us would think that it's the teens and the adolescents that are the problem tech users. So if we do just walk around town and ask people, to be like, yeah, those teens or those college students. Well, you might guess that it's your parents that are complaining about those teens and adolescents on their phones. But you know what's actually happening more and more often? Is that research is documenting and revealing a large and growing discontent among children of all ages about their parents' and their grandparents' use of phones and the inability to get their parents' attention. Sherry Turkle again, she found that children are begging their parents to put their phones down at dinner and elsewhere. So you've heard me talk a lot tonight about Sherry Turkle already. I call her my academic Beyonce. So I think what you deserve is to hear a little bit directly from her. So I want us to listen to just 1 minute and 45 seconds from an interview on NPR's Fresh Air with Terry Gross, in which Sherry Turkle was explaining this flipped reality of kids begging for their parents' attention.
One of the things you write about in Alone Together is how children have grown up in a culture of distraction. Now, yes, I assumed that you would be talking about how children and teens are so distracted by texting their friends all the time. But you're talking about children's parents, too, that children's parents are distracted. I want you to describe some of the complaints that children have expressed to you about their parents being distracted by their personal devices.
Yeah, well, what my fieldwork has shown is that children, from the minute these children met this technology, it was the competition. I do my fieldwork in playgrounds, and parents are texting and on cell phones as their kids play on the jungle gyms and the swings, and parents text during breakfast and dinner as their children beg them for attention. Parents text at games when the kids are on the playing field, often missing the big score. Parents are on the phone in cars, and the kids are left to text in the back seat on their devices instead of having those precious moments, to find out to eavesdrop on your kids or talk to your kids in the car on the way to school. So children grow up learning that they're not the center of their parents' attention. One of the most poignant interviews I did was with a young man who talked about how his father used to watch the Sunday games with him and maybe have the Sunday newspaper between them and share the sports section of the news section. And now his father does his email and texts, and it's just not the same. He misses his dad.
So if you go on to listen to the interview, and I highly encourage you to Google machine it, and you can listen to the whole thing, Turkle's concrete advice, part of her advice, is that we need sacred spaces, like at the dinner table. We have to create these spaces. We, aunts, uncles, parents, grandparents, we have to model this behavior for our children because they're complaining about the fact that we're not creating it, and that's our job. So a year or so later, I was listening to Turkle talk, again, a Turkle fan club member, further about her research on NPR's show On Being with Krista Tippett. And I was particularly struck, yet again, by the depth of angst and awareness of children, of even the teens, the people who are supposed to want us to not be paying attention. The depth of angst of teens wanting their parents to talk to them, to look at them. I think it's worth a quick listen to a short excerpt as she talks about her most recent book, Reclaiming Conversation.
Really, this dinner table thing has been such a theme in my research, such a theme as teenagers look back on their lives and what they miss. It's teenagers who say, my parents text at the dinner table.
Right.
And there's a story in my book. This young man has a mother who's a gourmet cook. So her pleasure is in making these long, many-course meals, and that's how she shows her love for her family. And she's married to a kind of master of the universe, kind of Wall Street type guy. And he's on his BlackBerry all through dinner. And their son starts to try to negotiate with the mother. Could she prepare shorter meals so that then maybe the father would put away the BlackBerry But he's not going to do it if it's a 4-course meal. But maybe he would do it if it was basically just soup and salad. Or maybe he would do it if it was just salad and a grilled steak. And you see a teenager trying to negotiate some way to get this BlackBerry out of the dinner table. And it's touching.
Touching is the word I'd use. But again, that interview is worth looking up and listening to as well. And I'm a huge fan of Sherry Turkle's book, Reclaiming Conversation. I even changed an entire course of mine when the book came out. And last year here at St. Norbert, we had multiple book discussions about it. So one of the things she does in the book, Reclaiming Conversation, and backed up by research from the Pew Research Center, is we learn a lot about tech in our social lives. So about 90% of smartphone users say that they have used their smartphone during their most recent social gathering. Just hanging out with friends or, social gathering, whatever you do at a social gathering. And indeed, a lot of people said it was super positive, sharing photos, looking things up, taking videos, documenting. But when it came to the bottom line question, what do you think it did to the conversation, those 90%? 82% agreed, they admitted that it deteriorated the conversation. So I want to talk a little bit about this deterioration. What happens when phones enter even more of our intimate, sacred spaces? So I mentioned funerals before, and let's start with that. Sherry Turkle again, and I'm quoting directly from her. We're living in an environment where we're doing something that is putting us in conflict, that is not really helping community and friendship. We text during funerals. We text during religious services of all sorts. Turkle continues. When I ask people, why do they do that? They admit it. They say, well, we only text during the boring bits. And she goes on to question the funeral texters with justified exasperation. What does it mean for somebody to say, I went to a funeral, and when the funeral got boring, I texted? What have they forgotten about the purposes of a funeral, about being together with others? And let's talk about that being together thing in our everyday lives. So one of the more fascinating bits of research that I've ever read is this, that if there is a digital device on the table or even visible on the landscape during conversation between you and someone else, the phone, you can even say, I'm turning off my phone, I'm turning over my phone. If there is a phone in sight, it will significantly reduce the chance that the people talking in that conversation will talk about something of consequence, something that demands an empathic response. Why is that? It's because we have been socialized to know we will likely get interrupted, to be put on pause. Think about it. If you're talking to someone, would you open up a book in the middle of a conversation and just start reading it? Be like, hold a minute, I'm just going to finish this chapter. No, but most of us believe it's okay. It's become a socially accepted rule to pull out our phone just to check something. What Turkle and others have found is that we are telling people that they are not as interesting or informative as what's on Facebook or in our text or in our Twitter feed. And people are admitting that they are having to work hard to not feel devalued when they are put on pause. Let's talk about human empathy. How does all of this that we've been talking about affect our abilities to be empathic with others? You might predict what I'm about to say. The news is not super great on this topic. Research is suggesting that over-reliance on devices is harming our ability to have valuable face-to-face conversations, the most human and humanizing things we do. It's splitting our attention and significantly diminishing our capacity for empathy. How much diminishing, you ask? Researchers have been able to document a 40% decrease in empathy among college students in the last 2 decades. 40%. And the reason, it's not about you college students, it's that we have those data, that data set that is asked to college students year after year after year, so we're able to see that trend. It's likely happening in multiple other age groups. And although we can't know for sure the absolute cause, many researchers are believing and speculating that it's the reduced eye contact with others in face-to-face settings as the key culprit. Think about it. Think about Think about your day today, think about your day yesterday. How many minutes or hours were your eyes on your device versus on another human's eyes? Is it a drop in the bucket? Is it enough drops to fill an ocean? Is it enough to change a climate? This 8 billion times a year we're suggesting might not be great for, or billion times a day, might not be great when it comes to human empathy. And then there's this thing called agonism. Agonism is a term, if you don't already know, derived from the Greek word agonia, which means to take an automatic, warlike stance in unthinking use of fighting and belligerence and hostility to accomplish goals that do not require such a stance. You probably can guess where I'm going with this. Research like that of Dr. Deborah Tannen, a linguist at Georgetown University and author of The Argument Culture, Stopping America's War on Words, overwhelmingly shows that we are just plain meaner to others when we are not in their physical presence. Looking into someone's eyes, being co-present in communication with another human being makes us nicer. Have you ever read the comments on a Facebook thread? Have you ever read the comments below an op-ed? Would people say those same things if they sat in a chair face-to-face with the person that they're attacking? Our research shows decisively no. We'd say it differently. We'd tone down the attacks, and we'd express even rightful upset more humanely, more thoughtfully. So you're probably wondering, okay, the news hasn't been great so far. So what's this all doing to our mental health and well-being? Well, the news isn't great here either. One new trend that caught my attention just a couple weeks ago was an article published in the August 2018 issue of the American Medical Association's journal, Facial Plastic Surgery, and it's about the phenomenon called Snapchat dysmorphia. Plastic surgeons are reporting a significant increase in people bringing to them face-altered, face-tuned photos of themselves, like those that we use with Snapchat filters. Patients are pointing to them as ways that they want to look. Cut me open, plump me up, alter me so that I can look like I do with my Snapchat filter. When we look at the literature on mental health and well-being in general, the news is not looking great on many fronts, and most of the credible data are just starting to roll in because we finally do have enough data with screens and cells in our hands for just long enough to make some credible conclusions about the effects of our love affair with our smartphones and our social media. And of course, this topic is about a 4-hour lecture in and of itself, so I'm glad we're going to be here till 10, right? I'm just kidding. So I'm going to try to summarize it in about 1 minute or less. The best database summary I've found is Jean Twiggy's new book, iGen. And she authored a shorter version of her research published last year in The Atlantic, so if you want to Google machine that. In her book and article, she makes a compelling database case for the profound impacts smartphones have had on an entire generation and an entire generation's mental health. So iGeners, technically, are people born between 1995 and 2012. Both my kids, our kids, fall into the iGen group. I'm guessing for most of the undergraduates here tonight, 98% of you are iGeners, is that right? Probably. What Twiggy points out is that while iGeners are physically safer than teens and young adults have ever been, they're more comfortable in their bedrooms than in a car or at a party. They spend much more time at home with family than in multiple generations before them, and all sorts of other good news. Yet the data is not such great news when it comes to the fact that iGeners are psychologically more vulnerable than any other generation before. Since 2012, when the proportion of U.S. Americans who own smartphones surpassed 50%, rates of teen depression and suicide also skyrocketed. And she argues that we are on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades, and a significant proportion of this mental health deterioration we believe can be traced to phones. We, of course, cannot isolate phones and young people and do a controlled study. We can't do that. But there's some powerful arguments to be made, and she is making quite a few of them. And the question, the really quick summary question is why? What's going on? Why are phones making us so unhappy? Tools are not inherently good or bad. A quote by one of the teens in Twinkies research seems to provide a clue. A 13-year-old she calls Athena, this is not Athena, of course, reflects on what she did over the summer. Athena says, "I've been on my phone more than I've been with actual people." And then she adds, "My bed has, like, an imprint of my body." Teens and young adults alike, we know, spend much more time physically alone, although digitally connected. And the research is conclusive. Teens and young adults who spend more time than average on screen activities are more likely to be unhappy. And those who spend more time than average on non-screen activities are more likely to be happy. And there's not a single exception. And I know what you're thinking. The evidence also suggests that unhappy people are not significantly more likely to turn to screens. For example, research on college students found that the more they used Facebook, the unhappier they felt, but feeling unhappy didn't subsequently lead to more Facebook use. Essentially, the research is starting to suggest that overall, iGeners are feeling lonely and dislocated as a generation. So our tech, it seems to be irresistible. But is it truly irresistible? So Dr. Adam Alter is a professor of business and marketing at NYU and has a book out last year. Love this book. It's called Irresistible, and he's documenting some incredibly disturbing facts. When we dig into, for instance, the types of apps that people are using on their smartphones, there are some apps that people feel pretty good about, that are enriching. And most of those good-feeling apps include things about relaxation, exercise, weather, reading, education, and health. And on average, what the research is showing is that we spend about 9 minutes a day on these good-feeling apps. When Dr. Alter studied the apps that do not make people happy, most of these not happy-feeling apps were about dating and gaming, entertainment, news, web browsing. And on average, people are spending about 27 minutes a day on these apps. As Alter says, we're spending 3 times longer on the apps that don't make us happy. That doesn't seem very wise. If you want to dig a little bit more into Alter's work, I wish we had time and I'd show you a little clip from his TED Talk, but I'm going to be mindful of time and wrap up in the next 2 minutes. In this segment, in Dr. Alter's TED Talk, he talks about one of the things that's going on with our digital media is that it lacks stopping cues. So in the past, all of our media had stopping cues. You got to the end of a show, like we used to watch Seinfeld, you had to wait until the next week. It stopped. You had to log in or turn on the TV next week. You get to the end of the newspaper was gone. There was nothing else to click on. Most of our media right now is robbing us of happiness and the feeling of being in control because of the lack of stopping cues. So I'm going to conclude, and I'm going to conclude with 2 points. First is this. Here is what I think is the inconvenient truth of the entire matter, that of our current love affair with phones. And it's a truth that's inconvenient, as I said before, because it's easier right now in our own lives to not do anything about changing our habits. It's hard to change our habits. And it's hard to do this because there will be physiological changes, shifts in our body when we stop doing things that we feel pretty good about. And, yes, but the truth that we must bring front and center is about why and how we reevaluate our love affair with technology. And the most compelling evidence out there, we now have mountains of it, like that of Susan Pinker, as she brilliantly summarizes in one of my new all-time favorite books called The Village Effect. Also, love her TED Talk, The Secret to Living Longer May Be Your Social Life, which just gave away what I'm about to conclude with. We have mountains of evidence, Dr. Pinker's own research and that of others she cites, like Dr. Julianne Holt-Lunstead at BYU, that points to the simple and striking conclusion that social integration is actually what makes us happiest, the healthiest in mind and body, and actually significantly lengthen our lifespan. And what does she mean by social integration? Well, Julianne Holt-Lunstead did a series of studies in which tens of thousands of middle-aged people like this, who were like, please study me. She looked at every single aspect of their lifestyle, lifestyle, exercise, diet, marital status, doctor visits, smoking, drinking, socioeconomics, quality of air they breathe, everything, size of their family, all of it. And she wanted to know over time what were the best predictors of when these people would die. Was it clean air? Nope. Getting your blood pressure treated? Okay, but not the best predictor. Are you overweight? Do you exercise? Moderate predictors. Do you get a flu vaccine? Have you quit drinking? Stop smoking? Getting closer, but not the best predictors of when you will die. What is the best predictor of your long and healthy life is the quality of your close relationships. Defined as the people you can call for a loan, the people who will sit with you and mourn the loss of a pet or a partner, or who will take you to a doctor's appointment. And the biggest surprise in all of this research, a surprise even to Lundstad, even to Pinker, who found almost the exact same thing in her global research, is that the number one predictor of when you will die, how long you will live, is this thing called social interaction, or integration. Basically, how much do you talk to the people that you interact with face to face as you move throughout your day? Do you talk to the person who makes your coffee at Luna? Do you have a book club or a bridge club? Do you speak to the person behind you in the line at Woodman's? Do you talk to the guy who is working out at about the same time that you are? Those interactions, social integration, are the single best predictor of how well you will do in terms of your physical and mental health. And it has to be face-to-face. It can't be mediated. So I am honestly going to end. I'm going to end with, really quickly, the most shocking study I've ever come across, and I use that as a pun. A study a few years ago of college students went like this. It was conducted by Dr. Timothy Wilson, social psychologist at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. Students, like you, were recruited for a study. They were put into a room and asked if they could sit and do nothing, just sit with their own thoughts for 15 or 20 minutes. And the researcher said, we'll even pay you. And the students were like, sign me up. I can do that. So students came, sat in a chair, and then next to them was placed an electric shock machine. This isn't the actual machine, I just stole that image from the Google machine. The students were given a chance to see how painful it would be if they gave themselves a little electric shock. And the researcher said, you know, while you sit here, if you want to give yourself a little shock, go ahead. And the students were like, well, why would I want to do that? Do you know how long on average it took students sitting alone in a room before they actually inflicted a painful shock to themselves? 7 minutes. When you're addicted to stimulation, to feeling something from the tweets and the pings and the likes and the thumbs up, even an electric shock is a welcome substitute. Even among those students who said they would pay money not to feel the shock again after they got to test it out, 25% of the women, 65% of the men gave themselves a zap instead of being left to their own thoughts. One outlier, fun fact, pressed the button 190 times in 15 minutes. Yes, tech can be good. But what I also know, and the question that I'm going to leave you with, I ask this question of myself on a daily basis. I ask this question of my kids. I ask this question of my students. With whom do you want to have your closest relationship? A human or a device? Thank you. But I do recognize some besides. We have 2 microphones that are going to be right back there. So if you have a question, hop over there and just hop on over to the middle there, and let's see what's on your mind. I can't really see you, but I trust there's someone there.
Hi, Carol.
Hello.
My name is Annika, and my question was, what are your thoughts on platforms like telepsych or other FaceTiming platforms that counselors, psychiatrists, psychologists use to counsel their clients?
Oh, that's such a great question. Full disclosure, I'm not a therapist, but I have a lot of friends who are therapists and hang out a lot with therapists. I love being around therapists. I just feel better. And they talk about the real ethical dilemmas there, about can we develop the same level of trust? Because at the core of the therapeutic relationship, of course, is trust. Can we develop trust with our clients? What are the confidentiality issues in play? And so some therapists are sort of tiptoeing into that platform because it also gives access to much needed therapy to clients, to people who might not have that access. So I'm starting to see more and more therapists offering those kinds of services. So I don't know what I think about it, but I think it's a really interesting question. I think even some of the questions around healthcare in general, is it a good idea that we have these kinds of access? Yeah. Sorry, kind of a vague answer because it's not my area of expertise, but a really good question. I think we have another one over there.
So earlier you said that we live in symbiosis with technology, and there are many researchers who have started to say recently, because of the symbiosis, we can't live without technology, and technology can't live without us. They've started to call it a new species. And as one of those researchers yourself, what are your thoughts on that? Do you consider technology a species?
I do not. It's a really interesting question. I do not, as I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Sherry Turkle's work. She's highly critical of, for instance, artificial intelligence and robots. And quite a bit of her research, when she sort of switched from being all pro-tech, she's at MIT, to being really critical of tech, is when she tells the story, and I think she actually tells some of it in a couple of these NPR interviews. She tells the story about observing the ways that robots were being brought in, and the researchers were fascinated that this elderly adult was talking to the robot as if it was a person and disclosing really deep and emotional things. And the researchers were like, isn't this great? Maybe we could put robots in nursing homes and people would feel better. And Dr. Turkle was horrified at this notion that we could believe that machines could have empathy. One of the most human things we do, that machines can actually feel. They can do lots of great things. So I have to say, I don't think it's a species. I think it's powerful, but I don't think it'll ever get to that point. I think we have one more question. Is that right? Time for one more? Go for it.
Okay. This may be another one of those questions that's slightly outside of your expertise. I'm just going to ask it. I'm an educator in schools, and my school just moved to one-to-one computing. I don't know how much people know, but like some classrooms, 100% of the work is online now. Google Classroom and all that kind of stuff. And I'm wondering if you've looked into the research that technology is having on schools, educationally, socially, anything like that.
Yeah, it's not good. So, one of the arguments that's made is that, okay, well, we have to get our kids technologically savvy or they're going to be behind in the world. We need to give our kindergartners iPads and we need to have our first graders, fully. And it's an interesting argument that I think falls apart when you start to think about, for instance, there's a reason that 16 is the driving age in most states. We don't say to our children, like, let's get you behind the wheel as a 5-year-old, because then when you turn 16, you'll be a better driver. Our children are going to be immersed in the technology. So doing it too early, a lot, and I believe this as well, most of our profound learning, and we have research on this, like with MOOCs, everybody's on MOOCs, massive open online courses are going to be the next big thing. They aren't. They haven't panned out because most of the students who we thought MOOCs could serve don't do well in them. The most profound learning happens in conversation with another human being. Part of it's motivation, but part of it's because ideas are complex. We need to interact as we learn. I'm sure there are other people out there who would argue differently. That's the research that I've been consuming, and actually Sherry Turkle makes a really fine case for reducing technology in the classroom as much as we can at every level of education. I love that question. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, if you could all join me in thanking Carol. And please do feel free to help yourself to